No one expected chivalry from David, her ex-husband. But the bitter reality of losing everything was a blow. David's refusal to support Michael, her son, was unsurprising. He wasn't Michael's biological father, but he had raised him from infancy with love. Now, he claimed he wouldn't support someone else's child, a cruel twist of fate after years of seeming affection. His refusal to support Michael, while painful, was bearable. The real blow was losing the house. David had somehow manipulated the situation, claiming full ownership of the property they had bought together. Mary had even sold her apartment to fund the purchase. Now she and Michael were left homeless, forced to pack their belongings and leave the home she had lovingly furnished. It was a cruel betrayal she couldn't fathom. In hindsight, she shared some of the blame. Mary had entered the legal proceedings completely unprepared, naively hoping that her ex-husband wouldn't stoop so low. It was a painful lesson. David had meticulously gathered all the necessary documentation to claim the house for himself. Adding insult to injury, Mary suspected Julia, David's new girlfriend, had a hand in their misfortune. After all, David had left the family for her. It wasn't about Julia's looks, but her influential connections. She was the daughter of high-ranking officials and held a prestigious position herself. Mary believed Julia had ensured David secured a top-notch lawyer, leaving Mary no chance of winning the case. Now, stripped of everything, Mary was forced to grapple with the daunting question of where she and her son would go next. "Excuse me, Mum, can you buy it, please? I need to sell it." A child's voice broke through Mary's thoughts. She turned to see a young boy, perhaps a little older than Michael, holding out a book. Upon closer inspection, she realised it was a passport, a strange item for a child to be selling. The boy seemed ordinary enough, though clearly neglected, with messy hair and worn clothes, but his eyes held a spark of cheerfulness. "What's this?" Mary asked, intrigued. "This is a passport," the boy replied. "Would you like to buy it, Mum? I'm not asking for much. How much would you give me?" "Whose is it? Where did you get it? You don't have your own passport yet, do you?" "Of course not, it's not mine. I don't know whose it is. I found it," the child explained. "Well, I think you should take it to the police or try to return it to the owner. There should be an address inside," Mary gently advised. "There is an address, Mum," the boy replied. "But it's far away, in the suburbs. I have no way to get there. It would be expensive, and I have no money. I don't want to go to the police either. They'll ask me questions, maybe even want to visit my home. My stepfather is there and he can't be involved with the police. He'll scold me for it. I just need some money, even a little bit." The boy's voice grew more desperate. Mary's heart ached for the boy. She agreed to buy the passport, pulling out the cash she had and handing it over. Without even glancing at it, she tucked it into her purse. She didn't need the document. She simply wanted to help the child. He clearly needed the money and seemed practically orphaned with a stepfather who was likely a drunkard. Mary sighed, realising how much hardship existed in the world. She chastised herself for dwelling on her divorce when she had so much to be grateful for. At least her son had her, a loving mother, and she had a fulfilling job as a respected doctor. There was hope that her Michael would never have to resort to begging like this unfortunate boy. The encounter with the boy soon faded from Mary's mind as she focused on her own troubles, searching for a rental apartment and preparing for the move. Only later that evening, while emptying her purse, did she remember the passport and grimaced in annoyance. She'd have to take it to the police herself. Out of curiosity, she opened it and froze. The photo was the source of her shock. She looked at the name. James Brown. An unknown name to her, but the face in the photo was etched in her memory. Could it be? She thought, her mind racing. But how come? Disbelief washed over her. Was this a case of mistaken identity, or was there a deeper mystery at play? A shiver ran down her spine as she realised the implications of this unexpected discovery. She checked the address and confirmed the boy had been honest. The man lived in a private house in the suburbs. Fantastic, Mary muttered under her breath. As if my life isn't complicated enough, now I have to deal with this. The logical thing would be to hand it over to the police, but the nagging question remained. Who was this man? The photo in the passport kept drawing her back. A sudden thought sparked in her mind. Perhaps visiting the address and returning the passport personally wasn't such a bad idea. It would be a perfect excuse to satisfy her curiosity and uncover the truth behind the mysterious photo. Why was she doing this? Mary couldn't explain her sudden urge to investigate, but she packed her things and set off for the suburbs. After all, the drive was only an hour or so, and it might be a welcome distraction from her troubles. Finding the address was surprisingly easy. She rang the doorbell, and a middle-aged woman answered. "Excuse me," Mary began, passport in hand. "Does James Brown live here?" "Lived?" "Oh my! He passed away a few years ago," the woman replied, surprise evident in her voice. "Passed away?" Mary stammered, taken aback. "I'm so sorry, I had no idea. I found his passport and thought I should return it." "That's very strange," the woman replied, a puzzled look on her face. "I'm his wife, or rather, I've been a widow for 7 years. James passed away. I was certain his passport was destroyed in the fire. The accident was horrific. They buried him in a closed coffin and explained there was nothing left to recover. His passport would have been lost too. I even had some difficulties arranging the funeral, but everything was eventually resolved. A death certificate was issued." "So how did you come across this passport?" asked Jessica Johnson, introducing herself and letting her inside. Mary noticed Jessica's matter-of-fact tone when speaking of her late husband. It seemed the grief had long since subsided. She then recounted her encounter with the boy who sold her the passport, emphasizing her desire to help a child in need. "I just wanted to help the boy," Mary explained. "He clearly needed the money. I assumed he was hungry. He said he found it, and I didn't pry further." "This is all very strange," Jessica murmured, her brow furrowed in thought. "You see, after my husband's death, all the money vanished from the company accounts. If James hadn't died, I would have suspected him of fraud. Then came the news of his accident and death. With him gone, there was no way to investigate further. What can you ask of the dead? Now, I'm at a loss for what to think. Where did this passport come from? How could the boy have found it?" "I didn't ask the boy how he found it," Mary replied softly. Then after a moment's hesitation she asked, "Did your husband have any brothers?" Jessica looked surprised by the question. "No, as far as I know, he had no relatives." Her eyes searched Mary's face, curious about the reason behind her inquiry. "It's strange," Mary began, her voice barely a whisper. "The reason I came to you is because your husband bears a striking resemblance to my ex-husband. But his name is David, and their last names are different." "As far as I know, my ex-husband had no relatives either," Mary confessed, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Did you say your husband died 7 years ago?" "Yes, but why do you ask?" Jessica inquired, now thoroughly perplexed by the information Mary was sharing. "Because we met and married 7 years ago too," Mary replied, confusion evident in her voice. "I thought perhaps David had a brother, but—" She trailed off, unable to finish her thought. "And your ex-husband, is he still alive?" Jessica inquired, her confusion mirroring Mary's. "Yes, he's very much alive," Mary confirmed. "But we recently divorced, very badly, and unfortunately for me." "Are you thinking what I'm thinking, Mary?" Jessica asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think it could be the same person?" Mary responded, her heart pounding in her chest. "It might be," Jessica replied, her eyes glued to the photo. "I mean, look at this photo. This is definitely my husband." "Well, I can say with absolute certainty that this is David," Mary confirmed, a chilling realization dawning upon them both. "You know," Jessica said, a determined glint in her eye, "why don't I get a glimpse of him from afar? I could confirm if your ex-husband is indeed my late husband. If he is, well, a meeting with the police wouldn't be a bad thing. I think I could arrange a rather unpleasant surprise for him. My suspicions were never unfounded. From the start, I thought those tragedies he staged were fabricated because the money couldn't have disappeared without his involvement." Mary, unsure why, agreed to Jessica's plan. They exchanged contact information before Mary departed. On the drive home, Mary found herself doubting the whole scenario. Perhaps it was just a coincidence, a case of two men who looked remarkably alike. Regardless, Mary thought, I'm glad I bought that passport from the boy. At least I'm closer to the truth. As the mystery surrounding the passport began to unravel, her thoughts turned back to the street child. She couldn't shake the image of him from her mind. His life with his stepfather seemed far from ideal, and he likely had no mother to care for him. Thinking about the boy, she arrived home and immediately hugged her son tightly, whispering how much she loved him. The encounter had reminded her of the precious bond they shared, and how fortunate they were to have each other. A couple of weeks passed, and Mary received a phone call from Jessica. "Have you heard the latest news?" Jessica's voice was brimming with satisfaction. Mary instantly knew she was referring to David. "Not really. What happened?" "Well, it all started when I saw him. Your David is indeed my James. I was certain of it. But I wanted to be absolutely sure, so I hired an investigator, and he got all the answers. Now David is facing some serious problems with the police. I mean James, or whatever his name is. David was in serious trouble. The case Jessica initiated led to accusations of fraud and forgery, not to mention the fact that a stranger was buried in his supposed grave. His mistake of not discarding the old passport, thinking it might be useful later, came back to haunt him. Now, this careless act could lead to a lengthy prison sentence. His grand plans were crumbling. The impending trial threatened his marriage to the influential Julia, whose family would likely disown her if she associated with a convicted felon. Despite facing trial, he clung to the hope that Julia and her powerful father would come to his rescue. But such influential people were unlikely to offer help. They wouldn't even sit next to him, fearing the taint of his scandal. Through his lawyer, David pleaded with Julia, begging for her assistance. Her response was chilling. "Don't call me again and don't mention my name. If you do, we'll make sure you face even harsher consequences." David was cornered, desperate, and alone. If only he hadn't abandoned Mary, perhaps none of this would have happened. With David behind bars, Jessica reclaimed everything that was rightfully hers. Mary, on the other hand, was left with nothing. David's assets were seized, and the house they had bought together was lost. Mary bore the brunt of David's deceit. Despite this, Mary found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. What's done is done, she thought, her focus shifting to the young boy who had sold her the passport. His well-being weighed on her mind far more than the material possessions she had lost. Throughout the ordeal, Jessica had kept Mary informed about the trial's progress. By the time everything was resolved, their shared experience had forged a bond between them, and they became friends. When Jessica invited Mary to meet at a city cafe, Mary assumed it was a friendly gesture. But when Jessica brought up the topic of the house, Mary's heart sank. "It's okay, Jessica," Mary reassured her. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know," Jessica replied, her voice sincere. "But if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have recovered any of this. So at the very least, I want you to have your house back. It was rightfully yours all along." This was the true reason for Jessica's invitation. After the trial concluded, Jessica found herself the rightful owner of David's house. However, recognizing Mary's role in uncovering the truth and seeking to express her gratitude, Jessica insisted that Mary take back ownership of the house. After the trial concluded, Mary didn't expect any personal gain. She wasn't even concerned about it. Her thoughts remained fixed on the boy who had sold her the passport, his fate weighing heavily on her heart. Now, with her house back in her possession, she felt a growing desire to help him, though she couldn't quite explain why. Determined to find the boy, Mary realised aimlessly wandering the streets wouldn't be fruitful. She swallowed her pride and decided to inquire among the local homeless population, hoping they might know something. A boy of about 10, she'd ask each group gathered near liquor stores. He looks like a street child. Do you know him? Finally, her efforts bore fruit. That's probably Joshua's son, Daniel, slurred a drunkard. He roams around here, but I haven't seen him lately. Where do they live? Do you know the address? Mary asked, excitement rising in her voice. Of course I do, the drunkard slurred, providing the address with a flourish. Mary still couldn't quite decipher the relationship between the boy and his stepfather, but she thanked the man and hurried away. At the address, the door was opened by a man with a distinct smell of alcohol clinging to him. He seemed surprised by the unexpected visitor. Daniel, he ain't here, he grumbled. Probably out wandering somewhere. What you want with a kid like that, lady? He ain't done nothing wrong, has he? No, but I need to talk to him, Mary replied, her eyes darting past the man into the sparsely furnished apartment. Is his mother home? The man scoffed. What mother? His mama died 2 years ago. So what's this about? You from the cops or something? No, nothing like that, Mary assured him, then hesitated, searching for the right words. I met your stepson, Daniel, by chance a while ago and, well. She paused again, feeling awkward and intrusive. I don't want to offend you, but I couldn't help noticing. Things seem a little difficult here. Have you ever considered, perhaps, a different arrangement for Daniel? Maybe a place where he could have more stability and opportunities? Mary's voice trailed off, hoping he wouldn't take offence. I know he's not your own son, and if you were ever open to the idea, I would be happy to offer him a loving home and a brighter future. The man's face twisted into a sneer. Listen here, lady. What business is it of yours? He ain't going nowhere, whether he's mine by blood or not. If you got so much money to throw around, why don't you buy me a bottle instead? Or better yet, go have some kids of your own. You're still young enough. I already have a son about the same age as Daniel, and I thought, Mary started, but the man cut her off. Don't give a damn what you think. I told you he ain't leaving. Now get out of here before I lose my temper. Mary sensed the man's growing agitation and chose not to engage further with someone clearly intoxicated. While his protectiveness of Daniel might have been admirable under different circumstances, Mary suspected it was motivated more by financial gain than genuine care. It was doubtful the boy saw any of those benefits himself. This only fueled Mary's resolve to help Daniel. She decided to contact Child Protective Services, wondering why they hadn't intervened already given the obvious neglect. But before taking that step, she needed to speak with the boy himself. As luck would have it, Mary ran into Daniel that very day as he seemed to be heading home. Daniel, hi, remember me? She asked. The boy squinted, then his face lit up in recognition. Oh yeah, I sold you that passport, right? Yes, Mary smiled. I'm Mary. I wanted to talk to you. About what? The passport? That was a while ago. No, the passport's all taken care of. I returned it to the owner, she reassured him. It's something else. Tell me, how's life at home with your stepdad? It's okay, the boy replied with a cheerful shrug. But he drinks, Mary observed, her concern evident. Yeah, sometimes, Daniel admitted. But he works too. Drinking is like a sickness, you know? He doesn't do anything bad when he's drunk, so it's fine. Would you like to live somewhere else, Daniel? Mary asked tentatively, unsure how to approach the sensitive subject. Like in a foster home or something? Daniel's eyes widened with apprehension, and he took a step back. No, nothing like that. I wouldn't send you there, Mary quickly assured him. I was wondering if you'd like to live with me. I'm a doctor, and I have a nice big house. My son, Michael, is about your age. Why would you want me if you already have a son? The boy's confusion was evident. So you can have a good life, Daniel. Do you go to school? Yeah, I do. I'm doing okay. That's wonderful. But wouldn't you be happier living with me? In a good home with a normal family, where no one drinks or fights? My stepdad treats me really good, Daniel insisted. We're doing all right. I know it could be better, but he needs me. You wouldn't have to lose him completely, you know. You could still see him. Maybe this would even help him stop drinking, Mary coaxed gently. Her heart went out to the thoughtful boy. It was clear he was weary of living with his often drunk stepfather, yet he also felt a sense of responsibility towards him. She pondered how she could help him navigate this difficult situation. Mary, feeling conflicted but determined, decided to report the situation to Child Protective Services, detailing Daniel's living conditions and his stepfather's alcoholism. They assured her they would investigate. We've been aware of this family for some time, the social worker explained. Even before Daniel's mother married Joshua, she struggled with alcohol and wasn't a positive influence. There was hope when they married, as Joshua initially worked and drank less. He even adopted Daniel. But Charlotte didn't change her ways, and eventually her husband joined her in drinking. Sadly, she passed away from cirrhosis, and it was decided to leave Daniel with his father. He promised to care for the child, and Daniel became attached to him. Separating them was a difficult decision, especially since our checks indicated things weren't terrible. But even if the stepfather loses custody, there's no guarantee Daniel will be placed with you, Mary. And where would he go otherwise? Mary felt a wave of panic. To an orphanage? And then what? Then we'll see. You'd have to apply for adoption, but being single is a disadvantage. Besides, if the adoptive father receives treatment and proves he can raise his son, Daniel will likely be returned to him. Mary was filled with despair. Could her attempt to help the child end up harming him, with no benefit to herself? If Daniel were simply taken from his stepfather, neither of them would forgive her. For the time being, Mary opted for a different strategy. She would befriend Daniel, inviting him over and introducing him to her son, Michael. Even if they couldn't remove Daniel from his current situation, perhaps he would experience the joys of a stable, loving home and yearn for a better life. After their initial encounter, Mary made sure to keep in touch with Daniel. She'd often spot him playing near his house or running errands for his stepfather, and she'd always stop for a chat. She'd bring small gifts for him, a comic book or a toy car, and inquire about his day. Slowly, a bond began to form between them. One day, Mary saw Daniel looking particularly downcast. His stepfather had been on a drinking binge for days, and the boy seemed to be carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Mary seized the opportunity. "Hey, Daniel," she said gently. "Why don't you come over to my place for a while? My son, Michael, has been asking about you. You two could play some games or watch a movie." Daniel hesitated, glancing back at his house, but Mary's warm smile and the prospect of escaping his troubles for a few hours were too tempting to resist. He agreed, and that day marked the beginning of his visits to Mary's home. Daniel's visits to Mary's house became a regular occurrence, though less frequent and shorter than Mary had hoped. Despite enjoying the time spent with Mary and Michael, his attachment to his stepfather remained strong. No matter how enticing the activities, Daniel would always find a reason to cut his visits short. "I gotta go, Dad will worry," he'd say, rushing off with a lingering look of guilt. However, during his time at Mary's, Daniel began to open up to her. He answered her questions more readily, sharing details about his life with his stepfather. "Some people from Child Services came by and checked on us," he confided one day. "They weren't happy with Dad's drinking. They told him to clean up his act, or they'd take me away. Neither of us wants that. He's trying his best to be better, drinking less, only in the evenings now." He works almost every day, you know. He's a construction worker, and a good one. You call him Dad now? When we first met, you said stepdad. Yeah, well, I didn't know you then, Daniel replied, a shy smile flickering across his face. But he's always been Dad to me. I was just a little kid when he came along 3 years old. Things got better right away after that. And before him things were bad? Mary asked, her voice gentle. She recalled the social worker mentioning the boy's mother's drinking problem, but was it truly that terrible? It turned out it was, and Daniel remembered it vividly. Well, not that it was really bad, he began hesitantly, but Mom drank, even more than Dad does now. They say that's why she died. I loved her, of course, but when she drank I was scared. She'd get angry, bring all sorts of people over and always yelled at me. If she'd stopped drinking when she married Dad, things would have been good, maybe even better than yours. You don't have a husband, so it's not a real family. Daniel spoke his mind freely, unaware of the potential sting his words carried for Mary. But she didn't drink less, Daniel continued, his voice growing quieter. Instead, she fought with Dad, called him names, even tried to hit him. Mary marvelled at the 10-year-old's maturity, yet she also felt a pang of guilt and worry about having reported them. But the report seemed to have made an impact. Daniel mentioned his father was trying to change. Perhaps it wouldn't come to losing custody, though Mary doubted Joshua's transformation was permanent. He could be scared, putting on an act, only to revert back to his old habits. And how could things not worsen, with Daniel so fiercely loyal to him? All Mary could do was hope for the best, for both the boy and Joshua. She was resolute in her decision to not abandon Daniel, to always be there for him. One question lingered in her mind. Does your father know you come to my house? Does he get upset? At first I didn't tell him, Daniel admitted. But then I confessed. He wasn't mad, just a little sad. He doesn't forbid it, though. He asked if I wanted to live with you forever, and I said no. I want to live with him as long as he doesn't drink. But even if he does, I'll stay. Mary understood the underlying fear. Joshua was jealous, afraid of losing the only person he considered his own. It was a natural reaction, however misplaced. Mary tried to tread carefully, not overstaying her welcome or showering Daniel with lavish gifts. She even avoided direct contact with Joshua, fearing he might forbid Daniel from seeing her. Her concerns were not unfounded. Daniel wasn't always dressed appropriately for the weather. His shoes sometimes soaked through, even as autumn set in. Mary offered to buy him a jacket, but he politely declined. Thanks, but Dad's getting paid soon, he'll buy me one, Daniel explained. We don't take gifts from strangers. Strangers? What are you talking about, Daniel? I care about you, Mary protested. I care about you too, but no gifts, Daniel insisted. Really? Perhaps Mary had been too complacent about Daniel's well-being. The weather was turning colder, and it seemed Joshua hadn't received his paycheck yet, or had spent it elsewhere. The boy was shivering, yet he didn't complain. One day Daniel arrived at Mary's house, nearly delirious and shaking with cold. He collapsed onto the sofa in the hallway, mumbling, "Didn't want to come, but my legs brought me here. I'll go home now. I'm fine." Mary removed his hat and gasped. He was burning up with fever. "Daniel, you're sick. You need to warm up. Come on, lie down. I'm a doctor, remember? I'll take care of you." "I'll be fine at home. Dad's there, I gotta go," Daniel insisted weakly. "You came here for a reason. Lie down, Daniel. I'll call your dad. He can come get you and carry you home if he has to." Mary helped the boy into bed, trying to make him comfortable. When his fever finally broke and he fell asleep, she called Joshua. "Hello, Joshua. It's Mary. Don't worry. Daniel's here, but he can't come home tonight. He's very sick." "Will you leave us alone already?" Joshua slurred, his voice thick with anger. Trying to steal my boy, are ya? I'm coming to get him. No, you don't need to come, Mary tried to reason. I'll bring him when… I said, I'll come. The man interrupted rudely before hanging up. Mary was alarmed by his tone. He was clearly drunk and unreasonable. He's coming, she sighed, a sense of dread settling over her as she hung up the phone. Where's Daniel? We're going home right now, Joshua bellowed, his anger palpable as he burst into Mary's house. Mary met his aggression head-on. He can barely walk or talk, Joshua. He has a severe cold, he's burning up and delirious. He could hardly make it here, practically unconscious. Before you start making demands, maybe you should consider dressing your child properly. It's freezing outside and he's wearing a summer jacket, torn sneakers, and his feet are soaking wet. None of your business, lady. And why do you keep trying to steal my boy from me? Don't you have anything better to do? Joshua retorted, his confusion mixing with rage. Don't worry, he won't be staying here forever, Mary replied firmly. He'll get better, and then he's going home. But I'm not letting him leave in this condition. And why did he come to you instead of coming home, huh? What are you luring him with? Joshua's voice was full of suspicion. Because he'll get help from me faster than from a perpetually drunk father, Mary retorted, her voice firm. You can do whatever you want to, but I won't let the child go home in this condition. I'll take care of him myself, Joshua roared. Got a taste for barging into other people's houses, have you? He sneered, referring to their previous encounter. Danny! Danny, where are you? He called out, ignoring Mary's warning. Please, quiet down, Mary said sternly. He's asleep. He has a high fever and he can't go anywhere. Listen, Joshua, Mary said, her voice firm but gentle. I'm concerned that Daniel could become seriously ill. I'm a doctor, and I'll take good care of him until he recovers. You're welcome to visit, but please don't come if you've been drinking. He's already upset and his emotional state is important too. Joshua scowled. You're going to tell me how to live my life now, huh? Just show me where my son is. Mary led him to the room where Daniel lay sleeping fitfully. Seeing the boy's flushed face and laboured breathing, Joshua seemed to sober up a bit. He sat down beside the bed, gently stroking Daniel's damp hair. Mary led him to the kitchen and poured him a cup of tea. Are you convinced now? This isn't a game, she said quietly. Joshua nodded, his voice heavy with regret. I see. All right. Let him stay. You take care of him. He came to you instead of going home. He doesn't count on me anymore. Joshua lamented, worry etched on his face. He still does, Mary assured him. He believes in you, Joshua. If he didn't love you, he would have run away a long time ago. Do you think I don't love him? Joshua asked, his voice cracking slightly. I even got together with his mother for his sake. I could see she wasn't the motherly type, and I didn't really need her. All the guys laughed at me because she was known as the biggest flirt in the neighbourhood. But I thought I could keep her in line and she'd help look after the kids. But, well, you see how that turned out. Things will get better, Mary reassured him. You should stop drinking. Live a normal life. I know, Joshua sighed. But what can I do if I can't quit? He abruptly stood up, ready to leave. Okay, thanks for the tea and for Daniel too, he mumbled. I'll be going. You take care of him and don't worry. I'll pay for everything. Medicine, your time. Oh, please, don't be silly, Mary replied. Just buy something for the boy. He may have been a drunk, but he clearly loved his son, a fact that surprised Mary. He truly loves his son, but that cursed alcohol, Mary mused as she saw Joshua out. The next day, Daniel felt slightly better, and Mary struggled to keep him in bed. Your dad was here yesterday, remember? He agreed you need to rest and can't go outside yet, she reminded him. He wasn't angry? Daniel asked, his eyes wide with worry. No, he said he'd take you home once you're fully recovered, but you still sound hoarse, Mary assured him. But how will I go to school? Daniel fretted. You'll go when you're better. I'll write you a note. For now, call someone and ask about the assignments, then call your dad to bring your notebooks. That evening, Joshua arrived with Daniel's schoolbooks and some treats. He spoke to his son, reminding him to follow Mary's instructions, and then headed to her room. There he placed a thick stack of money on the table. Where did you get so much? Mary asked, surprised. And why? I told you it wasn't necessary. It's important, Joshua replied. Nothing is free these days. And don't worry, I didn't steal or rob anyone. You probably think I'm a drunk who squanders all the child support money, right? But I save the benefits and pension for Danny. He'll need it when he grows up. It's for emergencies too, like now when he got sick. This is for his treatment and care. And later, if you don't mind, buy him what he needs. Clothes, warm shoes. You women are better at that sort of thing. Mary listened with empathy and accepted the money, mostly out of bewilderment. She hadn't expected such a gesture from Joshua, a man clearly battling a serious addiction. She simply asked, Do you think you can manage on your own while Daniel's here? Come on, Mary, I'm not a child, Joshua said, a hint of pride in his voice. I've been taking care of Danny, not the other way around. And now he needs help, and thank goodness you're a doctor. A small smile flickered across his face. A moment of silence hung in the air as Mary considered her words. Joshua, she began cautiously, I know this is none of my business, but have you ever thought about getting help for your drinking? I see how much you love Daniel, and I worry about how it's affecting both of you. We have a very good addiction specialist at our hospital. I could talk to him if you'd like. It might be a way to improve things for both you and Daniel. Well, I don't know about that, Joshua replied, a flicker of hope in his eyes. If you could tell me more about this treatment, I might be willing to listen. I've thought about getting help before, but I'm scared. I've heard stories about being locked up in some hospital, pumped full of drugs. And then they'd take Daniel away. What would happen to him then? He paused, then added, Anyway, thanks again for everything, Mary. I got to go now. With a weary nod, Joshua turned and left, leaving Mary alone with her thoughts. The following day, Mary reached out to the addiction specialist. To her surprise, Joshua readily agreed to be admitted to a reputable clinic. He was determined to overcome his addiction, especially now that he knew Daniel was safe and cared for. Daniel stayed with Mary, thrilled at the prospect of his father getting well and the promise of a normal life. They visited Joshua almost daily, and Mary was heartened to see the positive changes in his appearance and demeanour with each visit. Only Michael was a little upset by the change. I'm happy for Danny's dad, of course, he admitted to his mother, but I got used to him living with us. I even told everyone he was my older brother. Now what happens when his dad gets better? Will he take him away? Mary knelt down and put her hands on Michael's shoulders, looking him in the eye. He didn't live with us before, Michael, she reminded him gently. You can still see each other and be like brothers if you want. Nothing has to change between you two. Truthfully, Mary's thoughts had wandered to a different realm entirely. She had grown fond of Joshua, initially drawn to him as a fellow soul burdened by hardship, yet one who clung to a certain moral compass. He loved Daniel with genuine affection, cared for him despite not being his own. The story of the money had touched her deeply, and his willingness to seek treatment and follow the doctor's advice reinforced her belief in his inherent goodness. Now, as the treatment transformed Joshua from a gaunt, perpetually drunk man into a healthier, more vibrant version of himself, Mary realised her feelings had evolved beyond sympathy and respect. There was a spark of attraction, a womanly interest in the man he was becoming. After all, she was single, he was now available, and they each had a child who got along well with both parents and each other. It seemed like a perfect fit. But Mary quickly pushed these thoughts aside, reminding herself to focus on the present and the well-being of Daniel. Her colleagues noticed her special attention towards Joshua, but some reacted with mockery and doubt. "What's this, Mary?" a nurse teased. looking for suitors among our patients. Oh, I'd be careful, another chimed in. A lot of them come back year after year for treatment again and again. That's ridiculous, Mary retorted calmly, though the comments stung. I've known him for a while now. I've been looking after his son, so I visit him. You don't need to worry about the rest, mind your own business. Why did everyone feel the need to pry into her life? But it was easier to brush off such remarks, especially since she believed in Joshua's full recovery, and there was no talk of marriage yet. The only person she could confide in about her feelings was Sarah. They still kept in touch, and with their ex-husbands no longer a topic, they had plenty of other things to discuss, including their personal lives. I'll tell you this, Mary, Sarah said after listening to her friend's confession. They say there are no former alcoholics, but I don't believe it. It feels like he's already had enough of this freedom. He'll hold on to family with everything he's got, especially if he loves his son. And maybe you too. Oh, Sarah, we haven't even talked about any of that, Mary sighed. I like him, that's all I can say. As for how he feels about me, that's easy enough to find out, Sarah said. What's not to like? Oh, I'm getting embarrassed for him now. He's probably too shy to confess. The important thing is that you show him that his past doesn't matter, that you care about him, then I'm sure he'll meet you halfway. The main thing is he doesn't relapse, Sarah worried. I wouldn't want that for either of you. What kind of life would it be if he's constantly in and out of treatment? Not to mention the impact on the kids. To keep him from slipping, he needs to stay busy so he doesn't have time to dwell on drinking. I'll find him a decent job, make sure there are no drinking buddies there. And we shouldn't let him be alone at home too much. He should spend time with the boys. Whoa, Sarah, you've already planned our whole lives, Mary laughed. We don't even know if anything will happen. He hasn't said anything to me. He could finish treatment and go his own way. The thought scared her. What if he does? What if he takes Danny and leaves? And then we just see each other occasionally like strangers? What if one day Danny comes to visit and says, "My dad's getting married, he wants me to meet this lady"? It's better than him saying, "Dad's drinking again, though." She tried to push those thoughts away, but they lingered, casting a shadow over her newfound optimism. Joshua's discharge from the clinic came as a surprise. He wanted to surprise Mary and Daniel, he said. He arrived at Mary's house with flowers, a large cake, looking handsome, refreshed, and full of life. "Dad, you look like a different person," Daniel exclaimed, his eyes wide with amazement. "Yeah, like an actor from a movie," Michael chimed in, grinning. Mary was delighted by the unexpected visit, but wished he had given her a heads up so she could have prepared something special. "Why bother?" Joshua said with a smile. "Let's go to a restaurant for lunch and we can have cake at home later. I'm so tired of the bland food at the clinic, and I haven't been out in ages." Everyone agreed enthusiastically. The day turned out to be wonderful. They enjoyed a delicious lunch at a restaurant, feeling like a real family celebrating a special occasion. Afterward, they strolled through the park, chatting about the upcoming new year. They returned home tired but happy. "That was awesome. We should do that more often," the boys exclaimed, their faces beaming. They had run around so much that they hadn't even finished the cake, falling asleep at the table. There was no question of Joshua and Daniel going home. Mary put the boys to bed, as usual. With the boys asleep, a palpable tension filled the air between Mary and Joshua. They stole glances at each other, both yearning to speak, yet hesitant to break the silence. "Mary," Joshua began, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for me and Danny. You saved my life, and you've given my son a second home." Mary blushed slightly, her heart fluttering. "You don't have to thank me, Joshua. I care about you both." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken feelings. Joshua took a step closer, his eyes searching Mary's face. "I care about you too, Mary," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. more than you know." Their eyes met, and the unspoken tension between them finally snapped. Joshua leaned in, his lips meeting Mary's in a tender kiss. The kiss deepened, and they clung to each other as if afraid to let go. The night unfolded as a blur of stolen moments, soft touches, and whispered confessions. They shared their hopes and dreams, their fears and insecurities. In each other's arms, they found solace and a connection they had never experienced before. As dawn approached, they lay entwined, exhausted yet content, knowing they had found something truly special. The following morning, they awoke in each other's arms. This should have warranted an explanation for the children, but it didn't. The boys seemed to instinctively understand and accept the situation as something natural and right. They were both happy. Danny was relieved they wouldn't be returning to their lonely apartment, where his father's questionable friends might still drop by. Michael was overjoyed that his friend, whom he'd already begun calling brother, wasn't going anywhere and would now truly become his brother. Out of some innate tact, they didn't bring it up with the adults. But Danny explained his understanding of the situation to Michael, saying, "Your mum is my mum now, and my dad is yours, so we're really brothers now." Mary was overjoyed with the positive changes in her life. She shared the news with Sarah, who was thrilled for her friend. "Listen, Mary," Sarah said. "What about Joshua's job? You said he doesn't have a permanent one." "No, he's looking," Mary replied. "We're managing fine." "That's good, but it's still uncertain. Send him my way. I'm about to start renovations on my house. Why hire strangers? Your Joshua is reliable and skilled, and I live just an hour away. I'll feed him, and if he's tired, he can stay overnight. And don't worry, I won't make a move on him," she chuckled. "Sarah," Mary scolded playfully, but she agreed. "Actually, it's a good offer. I think he won't refuse either." Indeed, Joshua didn't refuse. Sarah paid well and wasn't demanding, and Joshua had no idea she was subtly keeping an eye on him, ensuring he stayed sober. Unexpectedly, Sarah also found happiness thanks to Joshua. While working on the house, he discovered a hidden compartment behind some wallpaper. Inside was a plywood panel covering the niche, with no lock. It didn't resemble a safe, but it contained a large sum of money. Joshua didn't hesitate to call Sarah and tell her about his discovery. "That's strange," Sarah wondered. "I didn't put anything there, and that wallpaper was up before I bought the house. Maybe the previous owners hid it. Do you know them? They must have been wealthy to leave that kind of money and not notice," Joshua said. "I sort of know them," Sarah responded. "I haven't seen them since the purchase, but I have their name. The house belonged to the seller's father, who passed away. Maybe he hid it and didn't tell his son." "We can't keep it, right?" Sarah said, her tone serious, then continued. "You didn't take it, did you? Although the finder is usually entitled to a commission." "Oh, I don't need anything," Joshua laughed. "I'm not used to taking what's not mine." "Me neither," Sarah replied. "We'll have to find the seller." Sarah located the information, as she was meticulous with her records, but the seller himself had moved since the house was purchased long ago. "Can you believe it?" Sarah lamented to Mary in a late-night conversation. "That kind of money, and he doesn't seem to know about it. You can't just forget about that kind of sum. As far as I remember, he was having serious financial trouble. That's why he was selling the house so urgently," she continued. "He must have changed his phone number. And probably his address too." Mary wondered. "I still don't want to take something that isn't mine. And I feel sorry for the guy. He seemed so nice. He didn't try to overcharge, even gave a discount because of the urgency," Sarah said. "If you know his name, it shouldn't be too hard to find him," Mary reassured her. "That's true," Sarah sighed. "But first, his name, James Smith, isn't uncommon. And second, I'm scared. What if he's dead? What would I do then? What would I do with all that money?" "Oh, you're funny, Sarah," Mary chuckled. "Why worry before you even know? And why would he suddenly be dead? He wasn't old, you said so yourself." It's not like only old people die, Sarah countered. He was in business, and not a very successful one as I understand it. And life's short these days. I've even had attempts on my life before, and I've wanted to end it all a couple of times myself. Once when Victor robbed me. That's why I'm afraid to hear that he's gone. What would I do then? Give it to his heir, I guess, if I can find them. But I'm sure he's alive. Imagine how happy he'll be. Sarah eventually tracked down James Smith. He was indeed alive and well, but his business was in dire straits. The financial troubles he couldn't escape, even after selling his house, had come back to haunt him. By the time he met Sarah again, he was drowning in debt with nothing left to sell. When Sarah placed the bag of money in front of him, he couldn't believe his eyes. In the house? A hiding place? Incredible. And no note, nothing? He whispered in disbelief. Nope. That's how I found it, Sarah replied. Oh, Dad. He didn't have a chance to tell me, James choked up, remembering his father and their disagreements. He probably didn't have time. He died so suddenly, a heart attack. Or maybe he didn't want to tell me or was waiting for me to apologize. We had a big fight, my fault, of course. He was unhappy with a lot of things. Well, he left you a house and there was money in it. He was probably sure you'd find it eventually, Sarah comforted him. And most likely, he really just didn't have time to tell you. Yes, but it doesn't matter now, James sighed. You, Sarah, are an amazing woman. You found me, returned the money instead of keeping it. But nobody would blame you for keeping that kind of sum. It wouldn't hurt me either, Sarah admitted. But the money would be wasted, stolen, practically. I couldn't do that. Besides, I wasn't the one who found it. It was Joshua, a worker who's renovating my house. You'd think he'd be tempted to take it, just lying there unclaimed. But no, it didn't even cross his mind. I'm lucky to be surrounded by honest people, James said with a grateful smile. I guess I've got luck in something after all. Their conversation flowed easily, covering business matters, personal struggles, and the mundane details of their lives. They sat in James's office, the workday long over, yet neither of them seemed ready to leave. In truth, Sarah felt a newfound joy in James's company. She hadn't admitted it to herself before, but even when she first bought the house, she had been drawn to this young man, and he had reciprocated her interest. But back then she was married to Victor. How could she have known that Victor would soon vanish, replaced by David and her stolen money? Because of that betrayal, so many years had been lost. James, too, had feelings he couldn't deny any longer. I fell for you the moment I saw you, Sarah, he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. I dreamed of being with a woman like you, but you were taken, and I scolded myself for even entertaining the thought. But now I know, Sarah, this wasn't just chance. It's fate, and I don't want to be apart from you anymore. Sarah looked into his eyes, her heart overflowing. And there's no need to be, she whispered, reaching for his hand. Soon, a joyful celebration took place, celebrating not one but 2 engagements. Sarah and James, along with Mary and Joshua, were planning their weddings, though they chose to hold them on separate days. Mary and Joshua were particularly eager to get married. We're already like a big family in everything but name, Joshua said, hugging his bride-to-be. There's no need for a long engagement. Oh, a big family, huh? 3 kids already, Sarah remarked with a playful smile. That's right, Mary added, her eyes shining with happiness. The little one is already growing inside me. The future looked bright for both couples, their lives intertwined by a series of unexpected events and a shared commitment to love, family, and second chances.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated with our latest videos. Thanks for your support. Have a beautiful day.